Welcome to the SOB radio show, where we have fun, interesting guests, and hot topics. Each week, we offer insights into music, fashion, health, fitness, and humor. Do you have the perfect guest for us to interview? I want to know. Drop me a line on our Facebook page at SpunkyOldBroad1 or reach out to me on our website at SpunkyOldBroad.com. And now, back to the show.
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Gail Carson, and I am just thrilled to have Kathleen Gage with us today. She has owned and operated her speaking and consulting business since 1994, and I think at that time, coaching wasn't even in some people's language. An award-winning speaker, author, and marketing strategist, she works with mission-based, plant-based, and vegan companies on business development, including marketing and sales strategies. With more than 30 years of experience in sales, marketing, management, public relations, and promotions, she has consulted and trained organizations such as the U.S. Marine Corps, Novus Corporation, and AT&T. Ever one to push her own limits, she completed her first full marathon at the age of 60. So those of you sitting out there saying, I can't get off the couch, I don't want to hear any more about that. She received her certificate of completion for plant-based nutrition from Cornell University at the age of 64 and is on the lookout for her next personal challenge as she approaches 67. And it's so interesting. I called my daughter this morning. She turned 63. And we're 20 years apart. It's really interesting to see how the changes are happening. So some of her greatest passions, and this is what I love about Kathleen, some of her greatest passions are caring for a slew of rescued animals she calls family, because you guys know how much I love animals, running near the river, and hosting 2 podcast shows, including Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast and Power Up for Profits podcast shows. Well, Kathleen, I want to welcome you, but you ought to just slow down a little bit, I think.
No. I have to catch up to you, Dr. Carson. It's great to be here.
Well, I'm a nut for animals. My poor little kitty is still in the hospital.
Oh.
I hope he's getting better. He's got very loose diarrhea. So after he completely destroyed my entire house, I had to send him to the clinic, and they said he may be there another week. But my other cat, which is quite interesting, has taken over as top cat and won't leave me alone. Things that she didn't do while I had the other cat, she's now doing. So I know your passion for plant-based eating, for animals, and the fact that you ran your first marathon at 60. I love all of it. So
thank you.
Do you consider yourself an SOB, a spunky old woman?
Oh my gosh, I should hope so. And seriously, when I look at women like you that are doing what you're doing at your age, which is fantastic, that's what I aspire for, is to never give up and to always have that next mountain to climb. Because quite seriously, I think if we just sit down and say that we're too old to do something, we become really old. It's all about what we think.
I agree with you. I think mindset is such a big part of everything. And that's one of the things that I practice all the time is good mindset. But, it is true that as we age, in fact, I have a virtual SOB club on my Facebook page. And I ask them, in order to join, what's your biggest pain and what's your biggest joy? And their biggest pain usually is pain. I mean, it's their knees or their legs
right.
or their back. And I can attest to that. And I spoke to my son the other day and I said, oh gosh, I feel I'm so creaky. And he said, Mom, I'm 56 and the pains I have now, and he's a workout guy. And he said, the pains I have now compared to 2 years ago are unbelievable. So he says, you're doing really great at your age. So it is true. I mean, and then of course, the biggest joy I hear from them.
Gail.
Vicious at cards, but she's just got a great attitude and she's very much into gratitude.
Let me
so she would be one. And then Ruth Heydrich is another one. She's also in her late 80s and she is a marathoner. And she said the way to win in your age group is to keep running and never die, and then you'll always win in your age group. But she actually is in her late 80s, still does marathons. She has done triathlons. Just an amazing woman who many years ago, how she got in the sport was she actually had breast cancer. And so I look to people that are usually 20, 30, even 40 years, the centurions. I have so much admiration for people who refuse to give up. And I want to share why I went plant-based. One reason is because of inflammation, and I was 64 at the time, and I had severe inflammation, and I started doing some research and realized that getting rid of animal-based products and dairy-based products would get rid of the inflammation. Well, then I realized I had a disconnect between what I ate and my love of animals. So it all kind of fell together for me.
Wow. It's interesting that you talked about some of the past situations. Number one, my sister is 88 and she still goes like a bat out of where. And she was a psychotherapist. I mean, she still, is a psychotherapist, but she gave up her practice. But she is so active in the community and social justice and things like that. And she's in a book club and she reads this book every week, and she's so participative. And her husband, who's 89, still runs his marketing business. So I think by keeping your mind active, it keeps the rest of you active as well. And she says, well, I have to walk a different way now because if I walk a certain way, my hip goes out. But she still does what she needs to do, and she just does it in a different manner. The second thing you brought up was breast cancer. And of course, I'm now going through my 4th case of breast cancer. So I'm on chemo, I'm immune compromised, but I keep going no matter what. And of course, I say my car is programmed to the doctors in the hospital. It's the only place I go because I just don't want to be around people.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, I'm not depressed. I keep active every day. I'm going from the time I get up until the time I go to sleep. And all of that keeps your mind from deteriorating. So when do you think women tend to come into their own? Do you think it takes a certain switch or a certain happening? What do you think is the key?
I think it's a combination of both of those. I think that as we get older, we realize that a lot of what we made a big deal out of, which probably at the time was a big deal, whether it be divorce or death or the loss of a job or a change of a career. But what we may have taken really, really seriously at one point, we look back and say, well, that actually was a turning point in my life. That was something that put me on a different path. And also, I think that age does make a difference, because I know that, in my 40s, I had certain concerns about life, then in my 50s, and now in my 60s, it's like, you know what? I'm getting closer to whenever the end is going to be. I have no idea when it's going to be, but I want to make sure that when I'm done, that I've given it my all. So I think age has something to do with it. And I also think that life experience has something to do with it. And realizing when you look at a lot of the things that we used to make a big deal out of, with everything that's going on in the world right now. And I love that, the whole social justice issue, that those of us who find that something important, that we get involved with it, the COVID situation, taking control of our health in whatever way we can, exercise. And I was reading something recently that the number one thing for keeping the mind sharp is not necessarily crossword puzzles, which are great to do because it does make you think. Reading is good, playing games is good, but exercise is probably the best thing to keep us youthful and our mind sharp. So I would say it's a combination of both.
I agree with you. I was the Silver Sneakers Fitness Award winner before it started, but now I haven't been to the gym in almost a year, although I work out in my apartment. But it's not the same. I have to say it isn't the same. But at least I keep moving. The interesting thing is I did a segment for one of my mastermind groups on work-life balance, and I talked about almost the 7 or 8 different stages that I went through, being single, going into business, getting married with children, then when they were gone, then when my husband passed away, now, with my being interred in my apartment, etc. But there are certain stages you go through, and you've worked with a lot of women in business over the years. What do you think is the number one area where you think and feel that women really need to step up to the place?
They need to actually be more visible. For whatever reason, women tend to hide out even when they think that they're being visible. I actually have a training course where I teach entrepreneurs. It doesn't matter men or women, but I tend to attract more older women on how to get on podcast shows. And it's so interesting because they'll go through the training, they'll put the effort into the consulting I do with them. And yet when it comes to getting that first interview, there's things that hold them back. And it's helping them to walk through whatever their fear is of not having a voice. So I would say where they really need to step up to the plate is to look at why they're doing what they're doing, whatever their business may be, what's their bigger mission in business, and then getting outside of themselves and getting outside of ego, because a lot of times people think ego means that you're real boastful and arrogant, and that's one definition of ego. But another real definitive sign of ego is when people shy away, that they hide out, because that's ego saying you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not whatever enough. And oftentimes that can come from an old relationship, whether it be our parents, whether it be a spouse, whether it be a friend who really minimized who we were and we believed it, instead of coming into our own and saying, okay, I have something important to do in the world.
Well, that's so interesting, because as visible as I am, I even have a coach that told me I wasn't visible enough. And I said, what? And she said, because she said, you are such a powerhouse, and you don't play that up enough. And I got an email this morning because I'm looking for women to interview for a mastermind group that I'm forming. And this is not for them to join, but I just want to get their viewpoint. And she said, and I thought that was so interesting, you are much too powerful to waste your time on Facebook, she said. There's a much bigger world out there. And I just thought that was so interesting, and based on what you've just said. So, if you were going to talk about what your bucket list is all about, people say, what is my bucket list? And at first I said, well, I want to go to Greece, and I want to go to maybe a place like Mauritius or something like that. Well, I did go to Greece a year and a half ago. My sons were just gracious enough to gift me with the trip. And I have to tell you, I was disappointed. I loved Greece. I loved the people. That was not it. But it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I really wanted to go to Mykonos, because you see it in all the movies. And when I got there, it was like a windstorm. You got off the ship, and it just was so windy. I couldn't wait to get into a place where there was no wind. And then we went to so many ancient sites, which were lovely. But once you saw a site, you saw a site. We didn't need to be there for the 3 hours. So it's just really interesting. Right now, I'm so happy that I'm not going anywhere. And this was someone who traveled 4 or 5 times a month. So what is your bucket list? What do you have on your bucket list?
Wow, that is such a great question. And I would say one is a location that I want to visit, which is India. And for some reason, I've been called to do that for my entire life, and I have yet to do it. So, and I don't know what it is that's calling me to do that. But I would say that's probably one of the big ones. And then writing my memoir. I've been working on my memoir for about 4 years. And it's so interesting because I did a Google search on my name recently, and I've written 20 books, which I didn't realize that. But some of them are ebooks and there's physical books, but 20 books. And I was like, and it was even my sister-in-law who said, yeah, I did Alexa, and said, Alexa, tell me about Kathleen Gage. And it started with Kathleen Gage has written 20 books. And I thought, okay, well, that's a piece of cake for me, quite seriously. I mean, once you have a formula for writing, especially business books, and I've written spiritual books. But my memoir, for whatever reason, that has been a thorn in my side, where I've been working on it for 4 or 5 years. And for some reason, I start and I stop, I start and I stop. But a memoir is very different because you're becoming very vulnerable. And it's the whole thing with being seen. So even as visible as I am within my market, there are parts of my past that, because I've been in recovery for 37 years, I'm sober and I don't drink a drop of alcohol. And there's parts of that part of my life that I'm not necessarily proud of, and I've come to terms with it. But once it's in a book, and you've crossed an invisible line.
Yeah, but Kathleen, that's a very good story for people who are going through it, to know that there is a bright light on the other side, because you've done so much since then. But I think one of the reasons you're having difficulty writing it is because you're not done yet. You've got so many more things that you want to do and you will do, and you want to make sure that is in your memoir. One of the things that I am really conscious of now and really want to have happen is to leave a legacy. And people say,
right.
Well, you have left a legacy. And I say, yeah, but it's just like people still quote Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and people like that. And as you know from the inauguration and so forth, everybody's still quoting Abraham Lincoln. But, are they going to quote me 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Want to do that. And yet so many people who I know who have been to India have such a wonderful and great experience. So I would certainly suggest that you keep that on your bucket list, Kathleen, and definitely do that. And as far as the memoir is concerned, you'll get it done when you get it done. But I just think you have so much more to go. So, you say you were not always vegan, that you went there for inflammation and things like that. And I have to tell you, I am not a vegan. I do enjoy my steak, although I don't have it very often because I don't cook. So, you just don't microwave a steak.
Right.
So when I go out, which is never anymore, I will order something like a prime rib or steak or something like that, because that's the only time I eat it. And yet I enjoy it. So I think one of the things that I have found, that when I eat plant-based, I'm always hungry and I like to feel full. So I don't know, but I do think that having a plant-based diet is very healthy if that's something you really enjoy. So I know that you were not like that before, and I know what made you switch, but how long did it take you to be satisfied with that kind of diet?
Okay, I don't know if you're going to like my answer, but it took me watching one video about how animals are factory farmed for me to make that decision. And quite seriously, I was the biggest carnivore. Somebody the other day said, gosh, I remember when we used to go out, we belonged to a mastermind together. It was a very high-end mastermind, and we'd go to very nice restaurants. And she said, you were the biggest meat eater I knew. She goes, the bigger the steak, the rarer the steak, the thicker the steak, the better. And it was true. It wasn't like I didn't like meat, I didn't like cheese, but quite seriously, it started because of inflammation. So I did a lot of research on that. And like a lot of things I do, once I made the decision, and I cut off all other possibility. But then I started researching factory farming, and I was shocked. And a lot of people say, oh, I get only good sourced meat or good sourced dairy. And the reality is a death is a death is a death. And I try not to be one of those crusading vegans, but truth be told, the more I learn, the more I tend to lean towards that, because I realize how exploited the animals are. And if you look at it, when you look at where a lot of the health issues come from, like diabetes, for example, type 2 diabetes is a direct result of the foods that we eat. A lot of people don't want to admit that, but it is true. And there's plenty of doctors who have written amazing books. I've had the opportunity to interview a few of them on my podcast show, but type 2 diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, a lot of the things that we now take for granted are a direct result of what we're consuming. And the thing about plant-based eating, a lot of times you don't even know that you're eating plant-based unless somebody tells you, because there's tofu. You eat a lot of beans, a lot of legumes. And if you do it right, quite seriously, a lot of people assume that it's only eating salads. Sometimes I am so full from what I've eaten, because it is beans, legumes, lentils, things of that nature, that you really are satisfied with what you're eating. So it really is a matter of what we're consuming and how it's prepared, and if you use the right spices. I tend to use a lot of garlic now. Pepper is something I use quite a bit of. I use liquid aminos, and that gives it a nice flavor. So peanut sauce is one of my favorites if you're not allergic to peanuts. But there's really a lot of misunderstanding about what being vegan is and what being a plant-based eater is. And I just heard a new term the other day, Dr. Carson, that just kind of blew me away. And I fit that criteria, which is plant-based plus. And I'm like, plant-based plus, what is that? And vegan plus. It means that you're vegan and you eat plant-based, where there are vegan eaters that are junk food eaters, like Oreo cookies, they're vegan. And you can be a terrible eater and be a vegan, which means no animal or dairy. Or you can be a plant-based eater and you still consume animal-based products. So I combine the two and I say I'm a plant-based vegan eater.
Wow, that's super. I don't disagree with what you've said. And I do agree that people who are going through heart problems and diabetes and so forth, it's not only related to food, it's related to a lot of other things as well. But I do think food contributes to it. And I think, and I have to admit this, I mean, one of the things, I do have something on my bucket list. Two things on my bucket list. Number one is to have a personal trainer who comes 3 times a week, which of course is not going to be the situation now. And since I was going to the gym for 2 hours a day, I didn't really need one because I really did a good workout, but that would be on my bucket list. The other thing on my bucket list is to have a personal chef. And I think if I had a personal chef, because I don't cook, it's hard to believe that I had 3 homes and never used a stove. But and people say, well, how did your kids grow up? Well, believe it or not, I have to tell you that I got a cookbook. And I just followed directions. And if it said blend, mix, or stir, I made it. And if it said separate or puree or anything like that, I turned the page and I did it. Right. And at 12, my daughter said to me, Mom, you hate doing this. What if I take it all over? And I said, oh, thank you, thank you. So I paid her. That was her allowance to cook and to clean the house. And I paid her to do that. She was happy with the money, and I was happy that she was doing it. So it's interesting. We only have about 2 minutes left in this segment, Kathleen, but I just think that some of the things that you've mentioned regarding eating are so important, because I think, yes, with beans and lentils and that type of thing, you can fill yourself up. I am not sure I wouldn't get tired of a plant-based diet, and I've had tofu, which I did not enjoy, but it could have been the way it was prepared. But I will tell you that my niece and her daughter are both, well, they call themselves vegetarians. I don't know, plant-based or not, but vegetarians. And their son, my grandnephew, is a vegetarian. And I'll tell you something, Kathleen, it is really impossible sometimes to go with him to a restaurant, because he will say, can you take this off? Can you put this on? My son had him for Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving where he lives is very expensive. And they went and he changed everything on the menu, even though they had a vegetarian menu. He just changed everything. And my son said, I don't know if I'm going to invite him next year, because I do watch him. I've been there every Thanksgiving except for this one. And it's really interesting to see how he manipulates that menu, you know. So
vegans are known to do that. Yeah.
So I said, wow, you know, and yet I've gone to dinner with people who are vegans, and, you know, they're very subtle about it, and they talk to the waiter and they get it done. But anyway, when we come back, we'll talk about some other things. Stay with us, because I'm with a fascinating woman, Kathleen Gage. We're going to talk more and more about business and what women over 50 are doing in the business arena. So stick with us, folks. We'll be back in a few minutes.